The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to Jesus and said to him, "Teacher, what must we do? What can you do whatever we ask of you?" And he replied, "Well, what do you wish me to do for you?" And they answered him, "Grant that in your glory we may sit, one at your right and the other at your left." Well, Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Can you drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" And they said, "We can." Then Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink you will drink, and with the baptism with which I am baptized you will be baptized. But to sit at my right or my left is not mine to give, but is for those for whom it has been prepared." Well, when the 10 heard this, they became indignant at James and John. So Jesus then summoned them all together and said to them, "You know that those who are recognized as rulers over the Gentiles lord it over them, and that their great ones make their authority over them felt. But it shall not be so among you. Rather, whoever wishes to be great among you will be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you will be the slave of all. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." The Gospel of the Lord. You shall not lord it over one another, no, but you shall come and be servant. To be great among each other is to serve. Well, some years ago, I was working in a parish, and there was a grade school there, and this, 5th or 6th grader said to me, "Father, I'm going to teach you a cheer." And I thought he was going to maybe use one of those stanzas from the 1980s, when I was, going to CYO basketball games, and in my youth, we would play those old Queen songs, right? "We are the champions," or "You got mud on your face, you're a big disgrace," that kind of thing. No, instead, he taught me quite a different cheer. He said to me, "Here's the cheer. Christian success is to be your best, to be less about me and all about we." Well, quite different from what I was accustomed to from grade school myself. And yet, I think he also offered me a couple of important insights just through that simple cheer about what Jesus is talking about in today's gospel. That our success as Christians really is about being our best. Jesus comes and lives our life in order for you and for me to live our best life, our best possible life, by our effort and God's grace, right? And in order to do that, I think this young man had the insight to be able to understand that, yes, it's less about me, and it's got to be more about we. Now, the interesting insight there is he didn't say, "Oh, no, it's all about you and nothing about me." It wasn't this kind of over-the-top, self-sacrificing kind of attitude. No. It's about we. We, me, is included in we. You, all of us, are included in we. Christianity is communal by nature, right? And Jesus is trying to, I think, teach that to his followers, that this way of being with one another, and certainly those ways in which we lead in our lives, and we all have domains of leadership, no matter who we are or where we are, we do influence each other. We lead one another, whether we like it or not. We're all leaders. Here, Jesus is saying to his followers, this isn't about one-upsmanship. This isn't a zero-sum game where some gain and some win and some lose. No. This is very different from what the world out there says. This is not that kind of leadership that you see out there, especially among the Gentiles, where it's a kind of authority that is really just a power play, maybe a power play that instills fear. And what we know about that kind of leadership is the minute that those who are afraid, who cooperate only out of fear, the minute they're no longer afraid, they turn on the leader. And every leader who leads by fear knows that. Every leader who leads by fear has this constant voice of insecurity working within them that says, the minute they're no longer afraid, I better look out. It's a really unstable and superficial kind of leadership. Also, I think we in this country are becoming increasingly enamored, oddly enough, by what I call a false leadership, a bloviating bravado that really, if you scratch beneath the surface of it, always is an indication that somebody is deeply insecure, if not deeply broken themselves, in need of some kind of repair and healing. We find out that those most boisterous, over-the-top kind of people who express that as a form of leadership, they're people for whom you do not want to follow because they themselves have deep, deep self-esteem issues. And they're not in a good place to be a leader at all. In fact, they're dangerous to themselves and to those they lead. We know that time and time again. We can come up with hundreds of examples. Well, here at St. Joe's, we have professors in our management department. Two of them that I come to mind are Dr. Ron Dufresne and Dr. Tim Swift, who teach servant leadership. They cue that from this very Gospel of Mark, a kind of leadership that allows us to be able to understand authentic leadership, an authentic authority, really. Their program in servant leadership, in fact, they deliver at St. Charles Seminary to try to prepare our future priests for their own leadership in our parish communities. But they do that also with corporate teams and other groups that are looking to lead themselves to success. What we know about this idea of authority is that authentic authority, the word authority actually shares a root, augere in Latin, with the word augment. That true authority isn't instilling fear or doing some kind of over-the-top bravado that somehow, I don't know, impresses for a brief time before it's revealed that it's something really, really not right. That authentic authority augments the gifts of those on the team, in the community. Because if you really want to be the most successful, if you want to gain the greatest accomplishments, you've got to get everybody's gifts into play. Everybody's gifts into play, and everybody's limitations may be mitigated in some form. But the only way you're going to be able to do that is if people are very honest with themselves about what those gifts and limitations are. And to be able to say, yeah, I want my gifts to come into play, I want my limitations to be mitigated, except there's always a time in which sometimes the limitations or weaknesses become a strength. That's an interesting whole dynamic, which you could take a whole course in our management department on. But I think what we want to do is say that this Jesus is offering the same instruction to his followers that I think we need to pay attention to. That authentic authority that augments the gifts of all of us and leads us forward to accomplish the best possible things is what we need in order for Christian success to be, in order for us to really manifest here on earth signs of that reign of God's love that's in our midst, that God calls us to live out the kingdom of love here and now in real ways. And the only way we're going to do that is through this servant leadership, where the gifts of everyone is augmented and we can go forward in an authentic an authentic community. How do we get there? Well, I think there's some insights into that letter to the Hebrews, where the letter says, yeah, just Jesus is the one who is our leader, is our priest, our high priest, because he was able to sympathize with us. He was able to sympathize with our weaknesses. It reminds me of a thing I was recently reading about Father Greg Boyle in his book, Tattoos on the Heart. Greg is a Jesuit priest who runs Homeboy Industries, which is a job training program for those who are formerly incarcerated and who had been living in gang life. That's how they got incarcerated, through their criminal activity. And so for 18 months they journey in a job training program. But in that journey they go through a serious opening of themselves to a transformation. They do their own work. And Boyle says in that program, you have to practice that virtue of sympathy and hope it gives rise to that higher and more powerful virtue of empathy, where we can empathize with one another. And once we can accomplish that virtue of empathy, and we then open ourselves to a real practice of compassion, a real practice of mercy. And if we can do that, then we can really establish an authentic community. He calls it coming into a sense of kinship. But those virtues of sympathy and empathy, compassion and mercy, once we move down those virtues, moving up into higher and greater virtues, he says we accomplish among ourselves what he calls the covenant of equals, where we all know we're in this together. We become a real community, authentic community, a real we, and we can move together and make things happen that we never imagined before. It's the only way for real success, deep success, to happen. And we all want to be successful, my friends. And so this letter to the Hebrews says, this is the Jesus who sympathized with our weaknesses because he was similarly tested in every way. He lived our life, so he knows best how to be open to that grace, we can be open to that grace, and he teaches us that, where we can live then our best life, our most successful lives. We can do that and therefore approach the time of the throne of grace for that timely help that we need, living our good effort, God's grace coming together to make us individually and collectively the we that we need to be. So friends, I think as Jesus instructs his own followers today in that way where he's teaching them a servant leadership, he teaches them not to fall for the false and superficial kinds of leadership that's out there. Those things don't last. In fact, they go bad. But to live this authentic servant leadership. And maybe the best way to do that is to remember this young man's advice to me, 5th or 6th grade, many years ago, where he taught me that cheer that I've never forgotten, because I think it is the key and it captures best how Jesus is preaching and offering you and me important advice for our success. Because Christian success is about being our best. It's less about me and more about we. So let us be the best we can be, by being the best me and you that God's grace will empower us to be. Amen.